Hey everybody, lesson 3 here on Vietnam and the Vietnam War. And what we're looking at here today is how and President Nixon going to get us out of the Vietnam War. So we're looking at this period from when Nixon's elected in 1968 to the end of the Vietnam War in 1973. And we need to understand that President Nixon wants to begin negotiations with Vietnam, but remember, he doesn't want to make it look like North Vietnam is going to win. He wants to make North Vietnam look weak, almost like that America has beaten you into a pulp and we don't need to beat you down anymore, so we're just going to back off. So he turns to his advisor, a guy named Henry Kissinger, and that's this guy right up here that I just circled. And he says, you know what, I want you to improve relations with the Soviet Union, Henry. I want you to improve relations with China so that we can persuade them to cut back on their aid to North Vietnam in a policy called linkage. And if you think about it, what he's really saying as he takes a look at this is that before linkage, before we have this new policy in place, you've got the Soviet Union and China supporting Vietnam. The idea of linkage is that instead of supporting Vietnam and having them fight us, what we want to do is instead have them cut that aid to Vietnam so that it's not there anymore. Because if that aid isn't there anymore, then it's little tiny Vietnam versus the big United States. That's the goal. That's what he's hoping to do. So to really kind of help that process along, Nixon starts another process called Vietnamization. And the idea of Vietnamization is this gradual withdrawal of American troops from Vietnam so that South Vietnamese troops do more of the fighting. And the whole goal here, the whole idea here is to put pressure on North Vietnam to negotiate. So we're going to make better friends with your big bad buddies, the Soviet Union and China, so they don't help you as much. We're going to make the South Vietnamese themselves do more fighting. And we're even going to start bombing you in places like North Vietnam. We secretly will bomb Cambodia, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, hideouts. We're going to do all these kinds of things to put pressure on you to leave, to withdraw. And here's, I think, a good example of what that Vietnamization will look like for America. So here is the troop levels that we had in America in Vietnam. They were really low, right? For a long time, they were really low. And then all of a sudden, up they go, really high. And here's where Nixon gets involved, and he says, we're going to have Vietnamization. We're going to slowly bring those troops down. And then the idea is, in just a little while, that war will come to a close. You know, even with these two policies, though, of linkage and Vietnamization, more and more Americans between 1969 and 1971 are going to join the protest movements. And I want you to understand why that is. There's 3 big events that spur that change. And one of them is in November of 1969, when Americans learn of a terrifying massacre of South Vietnamese civilians in the hamlet of My Lai by American troops. We're talking kids, infants mowed down. We're talking about women raped, houses and people set on fire. I mean, it is a terrible slaughter. And that outrages Americans that we're sending these people over there, and look what this Vietnam War is doing to them. Second thing is that as part of Vietnamization, as part of that withdrawal of American troops while southern Vietnamese soldiers do more of the fighting, we actually invade Cambodia to destroy Viet Cong bases and make South Vietnam more secure. But the problem is, it seems like to the American people that we're expanding the war, right? Because now we're actually fighting in Cambodia. In fact, it's even worse than that. Like, if you look, this is the map of Cambodia, and every single one of those little red dots that you can see down there, those are areas bombed by the United States Air Force during Vietnamization. 113,000 places in Cambodia that we, as Americans, bombed North Vietnamese or Viet Cong hideouts or supply stations, those kinds of things. you can understand why people might think how we're kind of expanding the war. On May 4th, 1970, people were protesting this at a college called Kent State, and we even have Ohio National Guard soldiers shooting and killing students at Kent State. And people are becoming just outraged that we have so many people dying in Vietnam, protesters are getting killed. I mean, it's really, things are supposed to calm down. That's what Nixon wanted, peace with honor. Instead, we're invading Cambodia, protesters are getting shot at home, we've got massacres in My Lai. And then in 1971, a group of papers called the Pentagon Papers were leaked to the New York Times, and those Pentagon Papers confirmed that the government had been lying to us about the Vietnam War since like the very beginning, from like the very beginning. And what we don't know is that while all of this is going on, in 1970, Kissinger had started to meet secretly to negotiate peace with North Vietnam. So America and its people are really just kind of confused about what's going on and why. So what we see then is even as America has been trying to use linkage and Vietnamization to get out of Vietnam, we still have all of this controversy surrounding it and all these people still protesting against it. So by the time the presidential election of 1972 comes along, we've got two candidates. One's Richard Nixon, who's in a tight race. He's criticized over the war and expanding it to Cambodia. And then we have the Democrat, George McGovern, who is really, really anti-war. He wants to get out right away. Now Nixon wins because he makes the promise that peace is going to happen soon. He calls his peace is at hand. If you elect me, I can finish and close out the peace deal. But what we as Americans don't know is that right after Nixon makes that pledge, the peace negotiations break down. So to bring the North Vietnamese back to the table and ask them and convince them to finish negotiating, Nixon authorizes what we now call the Christmas bombings. And it was 11 days straight where we dropped thousands and thousands of tons of bombs on North Vietnam. And in those 11 days, we destroy just about every major piece of North Vietnamese infrastructure. It puts pressure on the North Vietnamese to show them what we might do or what could happen to them if they don't pursue peace. These Christmas Day bombings help convince North Vietnam to end the war. And we finally do get peace in January of 1973, not long after Nixon makes that promise. And American combat troops are all the way out of Vietnam by 1975. But really, the bottom line is 10 years have passed from the moment the first combat troops got into Vietnam until all Americans are out of Vietnam. And prior to the Afghan War, this was our longest war in conflict. So what happens after we're out? The domino effect comes true. I think that's the easiest thing to understand. January of 1975, Cambodia becomes communist. March of 1975, just a couple of months after American troops leave, North Vietnam invades the South and unites all of Vietnam under communist rule in a matter of months. And really, the event that signifies kind of the end of the Vietnam Wars is in April 30th, 1975, when the last Americans leave the U.S. Embassy. And that's a picture of them getting aboard a helicopter, fleeing the roof of the embassy, the last helicopter out. And South Vietnam officially surrenders to the North. And then just a few months after that, Laos falls to communists, meaning that as we look at this, just as Nixon had foresaw, the domino theory is true. And so that what was once just Vietnam that had gone communist, now we see Laos and Cambodia and all of Vietnam really kind of falling underneath communist sway, something that Eisenhower had warned us of. So as we finish this study of Vietnam, what we want to get a feel is its legacy. What does it cost America and others around the world? In dollars, it's $173 billion to fight the war in Vietnam. 58,000 dead Americans in lives, 300,000 more injured. Another 2 million North and South Vietnamese soldiers and civilians were killed over those 10 years. That's not the only impact, though. So many of the soldiers that come home, people that you might even know in your families, they suffer PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And really, unlike World War II, unlike Korea, few American soldiers came home from Vietnam to parades and celebrations from a grateful nation. Most of them received few recognition at all. In fact, many towns and states across the country have little to nothing in the way of a Vietnam War memorial. that memorizes the sacrifices of the soldiers from their hometowns, unlike Korea, unlike World War II or World War I. And there's impact on the president as well. Congress wants to limit the president's ability to make war, so they passed the War Powers Act in 1973 to put some limits, to reestablish some limits on presidential or executive power. So that the president can't just do whatever he wants. He has to withdraw troops within 90 days. He has to ask permission to send troops. Of course, there's also distrust in our government and our politicians over the credibility gap. The Pentagon Papers, the fact that they lied, and that there's no way around that. And in fact, Americans still carry that distrust with them today. So we'll discuss a lot more of this in class, and we'll take a look at it together.